You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be here, Jim.
Do we have a special offer for our listeners?
Yeah, for new subscribers, we offer 50% off at VRTrader.com, and the promo code is 2022 half off. So any of our newsletters, and we have a bunch up there. We got our metals resource letter for those who are interested in gold and precious metals and oil and stuff, and we've got our cannabis sector for the cannabis folks. That still a few of those might be around. Maybe something will happen, and some of these stocks that are really cheap will start to turn if we get some legislation through here in the U.S. And of course, we got our blockchain letter, which is our crypto letter. And I got to tell you, I think that this is going to be, again, still one of the hottest areas out there in terms of percentage returns and gains in the months and years ahead, more so, I think, than the stock market. So you got to check that one out. And, of course, we got a few other letters up there in my book. So anyway, you go to VRTrader.com. 2022 is the promo code, and look forward to having you on board.
Are you a financial advisor?
Used to be, no longer. No financial advisor, nor do I provide financial advice. Those were the days where you didn't have as many regulatory issues and back office issues and all kinds of stuff. So maybe one day I'll get back into it, but I need a lot of support. You need a lot of back office support if you're in the money management game. And you got to decide if you're like a hedge fund and you're a trader, or whether you're a long-term holder. And I would say for most investors, they're better off if they're long-term, just buying some exchange-traded funds in the various sectors, try to be diversified, and just hold your positions, because long-term the market seems to always go up, despite some of these setbacks that we have. I look back at the little crash we had, if you remember, on COVID. I think the Dow's high was about 28,000. It dropped to about 18,000. And I'm looking at this saying, here you got about a 10,000 point correction. It's the time to get in. And look at it now, from 18,000 roughly in 2020, in March 2020, to over 40,000 here in 2024. So, that's unbelievable gains. And that sort of builds the case for those who are sort of buy and hold exchange-traded funds, meaning you own the S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, or semiconductor index, or whatever is your cup of tea. Though being diversified seems the place to go. So for young investors, that would be my recommendation. Unfortunately, the young investors want more action. So they're on TikTok and other platforms and Instagram, and they're doing a lot of trading, particularly, in the crypto sector. They're looking for the action. So I don't know if my advice is going to be well heeded, but definitely if you're going to do that, you want to have a little bit of both. Anyway, long response to your question.
Taking a look at crypto, Mike Swanson, publisher of Wall Street Window, when I talked to him today, said Americans now have more money invested in crypto ETFs than they do in gold ETFs. Is that a trend to look at?
I believe that. Yeah, this has been the problem for the gold bugs, though gold has obviously done well finally, and there was definitely a distraction for the gold players, thinking that Bitcoin and others would be a hedge against government and currency issues and so forth, and taking the limelight away from gold a bit. And there's no question about it. If we didn't have crypto or Bitcoin or anything didn't materialize after 2010-11, gold may have been a lot higher sooner. So there is the case that gold has been and continues to be manipulated by central banks and the government and so forth. And we publish a lot of articles about that. And one of my favorites in the sector of doing investigation is that group I keep referring to, GATA.org, GATA.org, that's documented, proof of government intervention in the gold market. But in the meantime, crypto definitely, has been a little bit of a distraction. And from what you're saying, I can't prove or disprove those statistics, but it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, a lot of ads on TV are constantly promoting, owning gold as a hedge against financial disaster, government default on bonds, and fear of, the digital currency coming into play where suddenly, there's no cash allowed and the government is monitoring everything you're doing and so forth. So, if that happens, people might want to do more other crypto that provides privacy for them in their transactions versus government supervision in some government-ordained digital currency, which seems to be on the books at some point in the future. But I'm talking more about, profit opportunity in the crypto space. I mean, some of the gains that we've seen in some of these small cryptos has been extraordinary. XRP, which is, one of the ones that I write about and talk about. I mean, it was like 30 cents within the last year, and it got up to $2.80. So talk about several 100%, gain there. It's something that was really inexpensive when you consider, Bitcoin, trading at $50,000 and going to $106,000. You know what I mean? So there's a whole group of them, and we're going to be focusing more and more of those in our blockchain letter. But my feeling is, with Trump being pro-crypto and, just the dynamics of the world at this time in our lives, I think you're going to see maybe, also including, young people getting more involved in it. Some of the bigger gains are still going to be in the crypto space versus the stock market. So if the Dow Industrials, goes from 40,000 to 60,000 or 80,000 or whatever in the next 2 to 5 or 10 years, that's a small gain compared to what Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of these smaller cryptos could do. Now, let's look, for example, at Dogecoin, fondly referred to as Doggy Coin. DOGE, I think, is the symbol on the crypto platforms. Anyway, that's Elon Musk's, little baby. And that thing, was up to about 60, 70 cents. It went down to 10 cents. Now it's around 35 cents. And I'm sure Elon Musk hasn't given up on it. That was one of his favorites. So how that's going to play into his long-term strategy. But, at 33 cents and with Elon involved in it directly or indirectly, I think pretty much directly at a certain level, I think you want to own a bunch of that. I mean, just because of his involvement. And if you had some money, you can you're an accredited investor and you get to invest in one of these funds that own private shares in SpaceLink or Starlink. I mean, SpaceX or Starlink, his two private companies. They haven't gone public yet, but they will at some point. But there are these platforms you can go to that offer private shares that they had bought in one of his private offerings. So it's a little roundabout response here related to Elon Musk, but that Dogecoin is something that, I definitely would take a look at as a speculation because of his indirect involvement. And even so, it seems to be a tradable vehicle. So for myself, I mean, just as a trader looking at stuff, I mean, I traded a little bit of it. I mean, the thing even goes from, 30 cents to 40 cents. I mean, that's a big, 25% gain really fast, and it could happen in 2 hours. And the interesting part of this stuff is it trades 24/7. I mean, literally in the middle of the night, if I can't sleep or whatever, or I'm going to the restroom or whatever I'm doing, I take out my phone and I pull up the Uphold or Coinbase platforms and see what's going on in the crypto world. And you see some really nice percentage moves underway in that market, and it's like anything else. You got to put it up on a chart. You have to look at a picture. When I do this stuff, I'm just not saying seat of the pants. Buy and sell. So you can get a little graph of it. Usually they're available on the platform. So if you can read charts and just look at the fluctuations in them and see how much they move and look at them historically and get a sense for them a little bit. You build the odds up that you can make a pretty good trade on this stuff. So I like it when they come down big, when, like, for example, this XRP, which had the big move I just mentioned recently, just, the last couple of weeks. I mean, it ran up to $2.80. I mean, this is like ridiculous when you think about the pricing here compared to Bitcoin, at 95,000. But anyway, so it dropped, I think, literally in 2 hours from 280 down to about 190. and then it ran right back up to 250, 260. So I mean, this is real interesting stuff if you're a trader or you're technically oriented in the markets. But even if you're not, it just shows you that there's entry points along the way. So I just becoming more and more a believer that when you see these type of moves, and you see stocks like Nvidia and Microsoft and Taiwan Semiconductor and even some of the oils recently. I mean, there's a lot of stocks you can trade, but you don't get the kind of gains that you can here. And I think the future in, next year or 2 or 5 years is going to be in the crypto space. So taking away from gold, as you brought up in your question, is sort of an understatement because gold will never make these type of percentage moves. I mean, gold's not going to 10 or 20,000. I don't believe, though many would hope that would happen. You're not going to see 300, 400, 500% gains, but you might see it. Even some of the more conservative people are saying Bitcoin, which is what now 95,000, might be 250,000 in the next year or two, which is still a hell of a gain, even for something that is a little bit more conservative like a Bitcoin compared to some of these cheaper ones that are a little more speculative but could still have a big move. So that's sort of the answer there. But as far as gold, Jim, gold is in a cyclically positive time frame here. Generally, it's up until about February every year according to the normal cyclical patterns. So maybe that's why it's upticking a little bit, but it's still off its highs. And I'm not quite sure if you're going to see, new highs here into February or not. You just might see a bounce and maybe a little bit more of a correction there. And remember that gold really ran up following the Hamas invasion of Israel, and it's a sort of a geopolitical event right now more than an economic situation. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why gold should have been higher, as you know, before now. With government spending and mismanagement of government and bad leadership and all the things that are going on and geopolitical issues around the world. But this particular time, I think it ran up. So with Trump coming in, belief is, I think it's a fair belief that things will stabilize and there's less reason to own gold here than before, though I still believe it's something you should participate in. So it's an interesting time. So if we get a little rally into February and it falters, you might have another buy point in gold, later in the year.
Central banks, especially China's, are snapping up gold again. What kind of a signal is that giving us?
Well, they've been doing it for a while, though, and that's part of one of the reasons the U.S. dollar has been strong, because they have to do their exchanges and their transactions in U.S. dollars, and that sort of supports the U.S. dollar. So everybody thought that with U.S. dollars going up, gold's got to go down, but that's not what happened. It's probably a function of the acquisition of it. I think the belief is that, currencies are going to fail, and the big buyers like China and Russia are out to destroy the U.S. dollar. They don't have to win a shooting war. Maybe they figure if they can, disembowel the dollar, they can win us in other ways. So I think it's just a function of their long-term belief that gold is your hedge, your currency hedge, your economic hedge, and we've seen this for thousands of years. Gold's always there, and countries and currencies come and go, but gold always seems to be around. My big fear, I know it seems like almost like science fiction when you bring it up. People actually laughed at me. I think they may have laughed at us when I made this comment on this broadcast a couple of years ago about the mining of asteroids, which is underway. I mean, the companies are actually preparing for this, and it may already be happening secretly. We don't know about it, but the amount of gold and precious metals and other, rare earths and all kinds of resources are infinite on asteroids. And when and if this happens, and it may be sooner than we believe possible, I mean, that could be a big depressant on prices. I mean, obviously, if there's trillions of dollars in gold and some asteroid, and they start bringing it back to Earth, and you got tremendous supply, and there's no shortage anymore, the future may be a lot of gold and precious metals and rare earths that are very cheap because of the of their mining on asteroids. So again, everyone think, they laugh. It's probably thousands of years away. It's not going to happen, but I don't think so. I think our science is much more advanced, and you can look up companies right now if you Google on the internet that are in the business of planning asteroid mining. And my belief is that things happen that you're not told about that may already be happening. That's sort of my belief for many, many years with secret government programs. So there might be mining already occurring, and this is a positive for civilization. I mean, forget the financial aspect of it. If we really need gold and all these rare earths and metals, for technology and for the advancement of our world, who cares what the price is? I mean, if it benefits everybody and it's cheap, that would be better. It's like saying a crude oil is cheap. Everybody is better off economically because they don't have to pay so much for gas or energy. And if gold and silver and palladium and platinum and all these other rare metals become inexpensive, that sort of equalizes civilization on a certain level, which is a big positive for humanity. So that's probably coming, and it's probably underway. So that's just something to think about, that there could be a big surprise to gold or precious metal people in future generations, or maybe later in our own generation, when suddenly things that are rare are not so rare anymore.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, the U.S. stock markets were closed on Thursday because of Jimmy Carter's funeral. What are your memories of Jimmy Carter as president and philanthropist?
Well, I'm probably the only one who brings this up, and that's just because of, my orientation, which is a little bit more to the left field or geocosmic. But my remember of Jimmy Carter is the UFO sighting that he reported back in 1969. And if you go to Wikipedia, you can actually look up a full description. Apparently there are a lot of witnesses at the time. The press is only talking about his involvement with Iran, which was a disaster, by letting the Shah fall at that time, has created generations of problems for the world and the United States. And giving up the Panama Canal for nothing, for $1, I believe I read or heard, was another stupid move on his part. So he made, on a political basis, a lot of very stupid moves, though apparently he was a good-hearted individual and has done a lot in terms of, human relations and charity and stuff in the years up to his passing. So I think he was a good-hearted guy, but he made some really dumb moves that affected the West. But the big story that I, again, recall is, and he was one of the first to do this, by the way, in terms of presidents and disclosure about UFOs, come out with that story, and at a certain level it discredited him, and of course that's what the press and the government wants to do anyway, because the UFOs are real, whether they're man-made or alien or not, that's a whole other discussion, and it could just be advanced technology on our own planet that we're not being told about. But in any event, he did see this thing, and it's not being really reported in his in today's funeral or in his epitaph in any way. But to me, that's sort of thing I remember most about Jimmy Carter. And unfortunately, he made some bad political decisions. But I think, good-hearted guy that just went the wrong way politically.
I remember in August 1979, he was fishing on a pond in Georgia, and an angry rabbit swimming in the pond came towards him and tried to get into his boat, and he had to beat it back with a paddle. The Secret Service wasn't there. They were watching. Apparently there's video of it. So UFOs and angry rabbits.
Right, and honestly, I never knew rabbits could swim, nor are that aggressive, though I've seen some jackrabbits that are huge, stand up pretty tall here in Arizona, and I don't go out of my way to get close to them, though I don't think they want to get close to me. But I have enough with coyotes and bobcats around here that I don't want to be dealing with angry rabbits, but that's an interesting story.
Anything on the geocosmic front we should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, we're just in the same cyclical time frame here that says, be careful a little bit in the markets because, as I mentioned, very few pay attention to the autumnal or winter solstice or the other cycles. But basically, we went into the geocosmic, looking at the winter solstice here in December, and that sort of said the market could change direction as any of the various cycles do. And sure enough, the market more or less, is topped out here. And the next big cycle point comes in with the vernal equinox around March 20th. So there's risk of some choppiness here on and off, in the first quarter of the new year, which doesn't surprise me. We talked about this in December as well. But still, there's plenty of opportunities here. I mean, look what's been going on in the last week or two. Oil stocks took off. We had some nice trades in Exxon and Chevron, for example, and natural gas. We've been playing that a little bit. There's a lot of talk about the LNG and the expansion of the natural gas industry, particularly with Trump's inauguration ahead. So some of the stocks in natural gas took off, a couple right near highs, recent highs. So we had some nice trades there, just coming out of the blue, so to speak. And a little bounce in even Bitcoin here, not this past 2 or 3 days, but before that. So we, some high flyers like Taiwan Semiconductor exploded the other day. And of course, they're building this big plant here in Phoenix. And that took off. I think one day it was up 10 or 12 points. I mean, there's still stuff going on. In fact, I think that's one of the headline was with our last week's podcast about, there's still things going on and trades occurring, even though we've seen the Dow starting to slip and the S&P starting to slip and even the NASDAQ pulling back here a little bit. There have been some pretty high flyers in the NASDAQ that came up. If you looked at the Magnificent Seven, big names, Microsoft and even, Tesla, which had a big run-up, that had a big sell-off here the past week or so. So some of the big names pulled back, but still, and the index has pulled back a little bit. But as I mentioned, there's still little bastions of strength and stuff going on, which is really exciting. So, that old expression, we'll find a bull market somewhere. And there's, if you're bearish, of course, you can play the short side. We went short the total stock market index, ticker symbol VTI, for a trade, thinking, we could play a little bit of a pullback here in the market. But there's always stuff going on. I mean, I've been doing this for decades, Jim, and I always said to myself, what am I going to do to make a living if the market's not going to be going down all the time or it's not going anywhere? And it's been just the opposite. There's always a bull market somewhere. There's some action somewhere in some stock or sector, and that's what makes being in this business so exciting. As I keep saying, the closest thing in life we have to a crystal ball is the stock market, and there's always something going on in terms of technological innovations or new areas or new areas to make some money. So whether it's crypto, as I highlighted earlier in this broadcast, or with oil this past week, there's always something. So a lot of reasons to stay optimistic about the market. There's always something to do and profit from.
Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me. Talk to you next week. Thank you.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. If you have any questions for Mark or for any of our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on X @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.